Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling Podcast. Today, we've got a listener and a great sales rep coming on the show. Bret is going to join us today, and he's going to share his story. And you would think that he has something that's pretty easy to sell. G2 Crowd is pretty well known, but nothing we'll find out is very easy to sell. You have to get your item in front of the right people at the right time, get into the budget cycles, prove it out from both a technical standpoint and a business standpoint, and keep that relationship going, keep the momentum going. It's not easy. But before we get into the interview, big thank you to everybody who's shared the podcast with somebody, told a friend, connected up with me on LinkedIn, shared and commented on the content. And also, come on, Pipedrive. Pipedrive's coming up with an enterprise version of their product. Get your company to switch to Pipedrive. I'm telling you, if you're a small to medium-sized company, it's manageable to switch really quickly. They've got customers in the thousands of users right now. And if you've ever tried Pipedrive, it's the only CRM I've ever used that I like to use. It has the email connectivity that gives you all the capability of knowing when somebody opens it, if they clicked on any links, when they opened it, all those alerts, populates and corrects the data in the CRM automatically. And Cadence, you don't have to buy all these crappy tools that everyone's trying to throw down your throat. God, enough with it. Have a cadence that really makes sense. And that's what I teach and how to start the conversation, get the meeting. Have your cadence match how people know, like, and trust you, how they connect with other people, how to get to be part of their tribe. So make sure you check that out, pipedrive.com. You can use the code BrutalTruth, which is in the show notes. You can use that on both Pipedrive and on Nudge. Nudge has got a great new capability where they can, in LinkedIn, you can just hover over the user's name and it'll show you who on the team is most closely connected with them. This will save you an enormous amount of time in getting into that account. We cannot just pitch people anymore. It doesn't work. No matter how many failed SDRs are out there trying to teach a course that worked 20 years ago, believe me, it did. I took the course 20 years ago. It worked 20 years ago, but things have changed. And no matter how well they personalize it, it's just not going to work today. It doesn't work today. That's why I came up with this. I had to change my whole model. About 5 years ago when I started my own company, it started to work, but it went down exponentially. People weren't picking up the phone anymore. Emails were being ignored. You have to build a relationship. You have to build a connection with the person, a context that goes beyond where they went to school. And you can't do it all at once. So that's why I came up with this course. People are crushing it. We're now coming up on the anniversary of January 1st. That means there's going to be 25 hours of real-world examples, Q&A, of office hours in the course, examples. And it's not just a course, it's a community. People get together and they share ideas during office hours, and a LinkedIn group as well. And you can also schedule one-on-one so you get a coaching capability anytime you need it, so that we can actually get on Zoom, go over what you're doing, how you're doing it, and seeing how well it is working for you, and I can come up with great ideas to help you move it forward. But enough of that. Let's get in and have a conversation with Bret. I'll sum it up at the end and give you an update on everything. Hey, Bret, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on your show. Long-time listener. Appreciate it. Bret Haren with G2 Crowd here in Chicago, Illinois. I come from the tech industry here in Chicago. I've worked at companies like Salesforce, LinkedIn, HR payroll industry for about 5 or 6 years as a broker and selling HR and payroll. So long-time lover of technology. And now it's really interesting, and to why I'm at G2 Crowd is we've seen a paradigm shift in the way people are buying software. And the way people need to shift their sales process is changing. And with social and so many different avenues of technology out there, it's getting really, really convoluted. And the market is just harder than ever to find good technology and harder than ever for people, I think, to really sell it. So I came to G2 Crowd with the hope of really changing the way that people are buying software to really make a big impact in the business.
And now, who are you selling to today? What's your market?
That's a great question. So me personally, I oversee a lot of the enterprise space. I have a lot of Fortune 500 customers, sell into that market specifically. But G2 Crowd, we're working with organizations across the whole gambit. Personally, going after buyer personas, anyone from marketing, CMO, to the CRO, all the way to customer success. And
so you have a named account territory, is that right? Or
absolutely, yeah. Yes. So we work with specific organizations in the enterprise space. Absolutely.
And what do you sell them?
Good question. I would say, so G2 Crowd is interesting, right? And when we go back to the topic of how people are buying software today, G2 Crowd is the largest B2B tech platform out there for people to read reviews on. So we ultimately are working with the buyers. We're a buyer-first platform. We help marry vendors with prospective organizations that are evaluating technology. They've identified a pain, and now they've come up with this conclusion that, hey, we need to validate throughout the buying process that what we are going to potentially move over to and shortlist, there are good reviews out there from third-party validated sources like a G2 Crowd. So ultimately what I am selling personally is a vision and an opportunity for vendors to engage with these buyers on a platform where we already know that they are in market, they are looking at content specifically from the voice of the customer. And it's actually funny, I'd gone back and looked at some of the videos that you've done personally. I love it when you're jogging in the morning. It's great. And one of the videos you did not that long ago was, why leading with value does not work. You have to build trust. You have to provide transparency up front into the buying process. So when we're working with vendors, ultimately, we are communicating that, hey, people are not buying from you. They're buying the vision of what you're creating and buying based on how you are helping your customers.
But I get that. But do you charge money, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got to make some money. So in terms of how we monetize, the site ultimately, and that's what we are. We're a website. We're not a technology provider. Our site ultimately, if you look at the market, I'm sure you've used reviews in your buying journey, right? Amazon, Yelp. So G2 Crowd, we monetize the site similar to how Glassdoor does. We give vendors an opportunity to engage, influence, and ultimately provide their marketing collateral, their content to the audience of people on our site. So when we get into the minutia, the very specifics, we are allowing them to have a profile to engage with those buyers. And we help them then tap into that audience through some other aspects of how we monetize the site and data, content, curation, et cetera.
So I would think that that'd come out of the marketing budget in every company that I can think of. Is that true?
Absolutely. But it's funny because, the customers, the way customers are buying now, right? And companies like Salesforce, they have this customer obsessed mantra. So really when we're tapping into working with the buying persona at the vendors I work with, marketing, yes, will lead a lot of that. But 9 times out of 10, we're talking to sales and we're talking to customer success. Because when you're talking to your customers as a vendor, and we're trying to get reviews from those customers of the vendors that we work with, there's a lot of data that goes into those reviews. There's a lot of collection of time to ROI, time to implementation. So what the product is doing good, what it's doing bad, why they switched, who they switched from. So when we're collecting this data specifically at G2 Crowd, we're able to turn that back into really powerful insights for the vendors that we work with. So customer success, they can ultimately use the data to make a better customer journey, or product development can use feedback from reviews to improve their product road mapping. So a lot of different areas are impacted, but yes, primarily marketing and sales.
So, I mean, I got to believe that this is not a tough thing to sell, but a complicated or a complex thing to sell.
That's absolutely right. And it's actually funny. I'm working with one of the Fortune 100 companies out there today. I won't name them, but we're in the procurement process. And one of the issues we ran into was onboarding just a little bit, because we do a lot. We work with a lot of different business units, and we work with a lot of different product lines as well. Some of these companies like IBM, Salesforce, Oracle, they have hundreds of products. So we're working internally and trying to really manage that sales process. And it's difficult because we need to focus on one thing first, and that's getting reviews from your customers. Without reviews, our site does not work. So that's ultimately why we are a buyer-first platform.
So how do you go about going into, say, a greenfield account, somebody that hasn't spent a penny with G2 Crowd, hasn't really looked at it, hasn't shown any interest in it? What would your approach be?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of your video casts that you did on LinkedIn was you can't lead with value unless you've established trust, right? So it comes back to something we do at G2 Crowd, and you've done it. You've talked about it on LinkedIn and in your podcast, which is video prospecting, providing some kind of insights, right? There's the challenger sale, talking about teaching, tailoring your message, taking control of a conversation. Part of what we have to do is teaching people. This industry has shifted dramatically. When you look at the buying process, right, 90% of buyers say that they're going to do their own research online before they're ready to buy. So we'd have to imagine that the people we're reaching out to engage with G2 Crowd, they either know who we are, and if they don't, we need to give them some insights into, why are we relevant? Why should they care? So a lot of that comes back to their competitors. What are their competitors doing? How are they competing in a market where there's, you take the CRM space, right? There's dozens and dozens.
There's a couple players, yeah.
Yeah, just a few. So how do you as a vendor, how do you really hone in on your audience and compete? So we'll go into a prospecting message along the lines of data points, right? Research that's been done on the buying journey. And a lot of companies, it's funny, you would think that most people out there have shifted and they're leveraging case studies and third-party reviews now, but they're not. Reviews are sought after at a clip of 49% versus case studies. That's Forrester's own research. So when you look at the customer voice, it's missing, and it's replaced with a sales rep half the time that's rambling on about features and why their tech is better than the 20 other niche solutions out there. So we don't do that. So in our messaging, we try and convey like, hey, we have this amazing target audience. We have people that are on our site, and it's all about in sales and marketing, right? The right message, at the right time, to the right account. And we know who these people are on our site. We know who they are searching for technology. So we can share some of that data and really give them just some insights into what we do, and that typically sparks a conversation.
And what is your strategy? Do you place a call into the CMO? Do you go through your LinkedIn network, find out who you may know there? What's your methodology?
I've heard you ask this question plenty of times on a podcast, on your podcast, and it's all of the above, right? Somebody, especially in the C-suite, they're not going to typically respond on your one, LinkedIn in-mail or a post on social. So we do a lot of different types of strategies, and I think it's combining all of them. It takes 7, 8, 9 contacts or touch points just to get somebody to respond, even if it's a, hey, stop bothering me. So I do all of the above, and I have found that again, conveying what other vendors in their space are doing and how they're using G2 Crowd to reach out to their target audience and how they're customer focused and obsessed. That's really what will spark the interest, whether it's an email, a video that I send out. That's part of what we do in terms of getting people to schedule a meeting.
And that meeting, what does that include? A presentation, a demo? What resonates with these people?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to understanding what's important to them. If they don't have a customer advocate strategy, if they don't spend time in their marketing and sales process focusing on how they tell stories, right? Stories are what people cling on to and people react to. If they're not telling that story and articulating it in a way with content that is digestible and short and articulate, then we can go into that first meeting and get a better understanding of where we might provide some impact. Because with G2 Crowd specifically, we're combating against Gartner, right? Gartner's a thought leader. They're providing all this great industry insights, but it's all analyst based, right? G2 Crowd and other review sites as well, us specifically, we're curating content all poached from the voice of the customer. All of those data points we collect in our surveys. So when we go into those first meetings specifically, Brian, we're leading with data, we're leading with insights, and we're leading with a point of view. Going back to how you asked me how we're making an impact in the industry, right? And why people or how people find us. So with that being said, it's kind of a long answer. We will go through in my space in the enterprise. Like I don't show a demo right away. Like that's selling 101. If I don't have something of, if I don't know what your challenges are or what you're trying to do for next year, I don't know if I can help you. So I think it's just having that conversation and keeping things really casual up front, asking some really good qualifying questions and figuring out is customer advocacy important to the organization? And if so, why?
Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time with marketing people, and they've got 1 million people trying to get a piece of their budget. They care about attribution, but there's no real attribution in B2B sales.
Exactly.
Right. It's like, cut it out. Oh, you put an ad up. Somebody bought an ERP. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're making judgment calls that are putting their neck on the line, because if they spend $1 with you, they can't spend that dollar with somebody else. And they don't really understand a lot of this new stuff. And they got all these people barking at them, telling them it's the right thing to do. And they don't know. How can they, right? It's a lot of instinct, experience, reputation, all this stuff. How do you keep that ball rolling with them? Because they are kind of, deer in the headlights sometimes.
That's a great point, right? Marketing and salespeople have 1 million people calling them every day, trying to get a piece of their budget. It's actually funny you bring this up, because I was working with a very large HR payroll provider out there. And working with them, they have they have a ton of different channels that they work through, and they can measure the success of those. But to measure influence and attribute ROI back to that, it's hard to do. A couple of the companies that I work with, they don't attribute influence back to, hey, did somebody come out and read a review? They don't do that. So for us, conceptually, we have to create that vision of how can we bridge the gap then between marketing and sales? How can we help a marketing person? And that's everyone's challenge in marketing, right? There's all this data out there, all these great things, but salespeople become overwhelmed. So when we're working with organizations, that's why we try to not be single threaded with companies. We're trying to say, hey, we know people are trying to get your budget, but if we can combine forces and provide you a way to make life easier for your sales team and give them the same resources you have access to in one marketplace. And that's what we are. We're a marketplace. We're like a trade show, right? 24/7. People can come here. You never have to, leave your booth. Your booth is always manned. You're always influencing your brand, influencing buying decisions. So now salespeople can interact with this on their own. So we help lay out that vision for marketing specifically to say, hey, we're going to give you all of this great content. You don't have to go and work for it. You can just take it from our site, from your own customers, and now sales will have access to this as well. So we create that conceptual ROI, if you will, around, hey, if you knew somebody was on our site and they're in the window right now to buy, wouldn't you want your salespeople to know that? So we have that conversation all the time.
So help me understand, because you got certainly products on your site that aren't paying customers, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have thousands of vendors on our site. Yeah. Quite a few of them are not.
And the ones that aren't customers, or the ones that are customers, what do they get that's different than the one that aren't?
That's a great question. So yeah, we absolutely have a freemium model, right? We just went through our Series C round of funding. We're at $100 million now. Companies like LinkedIn, Excel Partners are some of the big leaders there in investing in us. But these other vendors that are not on our site, because we are a buyer-first platform, it's all about making sure that the buyers on our site have an accurate representation of the ecosystem of the technology that they're evaluating. So vendors that do not work with us, they have the ability to add some content to their profile. We don't limit people getting reviews on our site. They can validate, the actual customers. They can validate with a business email. Primarily LinkedIn is the goal, because then we really know who they are. And authenticity is really important to us, right? We want these customers of the vendors to have a place to voice their true, transparent feedback. A lot of times people don't like that in marketing, right? Like, why would I want a place or work with somebody who has negative reviews on their site? So we try to ensure that there are controls in place, but a vendor that does not work with us, they can go out and get as many reviews as they want. So we really open up our marketplace to allow buyers to come here, get an accurate representation. And it's one of those instances where you may be missing out. If you're a marketer and your brand is represented out there, there are dozens of review sites out there. Capterra, Trust Radius, Software Advice, Gartner. And if a marketer is not represented out there, and this is where buyers now have shifted their decision making, right? It's interesting. Like 49% of B2B tech buyers, they cite product reviews as the most influential content in making buying decisions. So
now, I thought the model was different. I thought it was the actual in-market traffic that you were selling back to people. Basically, you could tell and trace people who were searching for categories that are similar or identical to your own. Or is that just a different market?
No, that's absolutely right, Brian. So part of our value proposition, specifically at G2 Crowd with vendors, right? We want to keep that trust with our buyers, right? But transparency earned up front, like, and providing a window into how your customers, if you were a tech provider, into how your customers, view your product, that's the vision that we're selling. Yeah. So when we talk to marketers and salespeople specifically, the message that we're conveying is, hey, half the battle, as I said earlier, is knowing who to target, who's in market right now. October is a huge buying time. People are getting budgets figured out for next year. They're trying to get rid of leftover budget. So now is the time, right? Budget, yeah. Now is the time.
I get extra money.
Yeah. Here, take it. I've had that happen. I have had that happen.
Fallout, yeah.
But it comes back to, again, that right message, right time, right audience. So yes, part of the data on our site and where we're heading and where we've already gone is providing that next step in the buyer journey. So great, we know that people are out on our site. Buyers are here. We want to keep that trust with them. We will never give up, who those people are on our site. That is not what we do. But just like a marketing automation platform that can track, IP addresses on a company's website, we have that similar functionality built into G2 Crowd. So what's amazing is that as a salesperson or a marketer, I need to provide good content and a good message. G2 Crowd helps with that, right? Because we're giving you access to your own customer stories to be able to provide that. And that's what people trust. And then when a buyer is on our site and they hit a profile, they hit a category, we can provide insights into those folks on our site and that buying journey. What competitors were they looking at? How long were they on our site? What are they interested in? So now you're going back to your prospects as a salesperson or marketer, and you can literally take data from G2 Crowd and say, hey, I know exactly who's on G2 Crowd. I know why they're on G2 Crowd, because why else would they be on G2 Crowd reading reviews, not doing it for fun? So now they have all of this huge arsenal of content, a story, and it's all taken from the voice of customer.
Cool. And as a rep, what do you run into as the biggest point of resistance?
Outside of budget, which is what we
budget's bullshit, right? It's kind
exactly.
It's like, yeah, there's plenty of money, but they gotta, where are you on the list, and how do you get pushed up on the list?
Absolutely, and I've actually asked that to customers and prospects. I'll say, hey, I realize we're not a top priority. We're a channel that is not tested by you today. You haven't touched on third-party validated reviews before. So how do we get up the list? How do we become a priority for you? So we have to have that conversation, and I think it's just being open and honest in the sales process. It's putting forth really, if you look at like the Sandler sales methodology, people buy based on pain, gain, or fear or risk, right? And what I think where we miss the mark on a lot of times in sales is, just talking about the economy or the industry that you're in and where it's shifting. So when I'm having these conversations around how do we become a priority, it's, hey, look, here's all of the data, Forrester, Gartner, all these psychological studies on how people buy. We have the traffic, we know that, and we know how people are buying today. If your brand is not represented accurately and you know that there are buyers on our site right now in market, why would you not take advantage of this, even to try it for at least a year? So that's really the conversation I think I'm having. And, I quite frankly, I don't hear no a lot. I hear now's not the right time.
Yeah. And so do you usually drive the salespeople to talk to the marketing people?
Both. We'll find avenues into either side of the business. If it's sales, we're going to lead with, how can we help that salesperson be more effective? Whether it's how can they have, a bigger impact on targeting the right audience, or how can we enable sales to reach out at the right time with the right message? And then they'll go back to marketing and say, hey, we need this, or vice versa, right? Marketing will go back to sales and say, hey, you guys need this, or you girls need this. So absolutely, we'll start kind of on both paths.
And what do you see on marketing stack that is higher up on priorities than you guys? I mean, that's external. Obviously you got the internal stuff, staff and everything.
Great question. I would say, people will prioritize marketing automation platforms. They want to focus on working, whether it's with an agency, curating content, whether it's product marketing, content marketing, digital marketing, spending money on LinkedIn. So all of these different channels, I think, and that's where people do end up working with us, is because we can impact and make their lives a lot easier by providing them with that content with the channel of in-market buyers. But yeah, I would say marketing automation is probably one of the bigger areas of focus. Website, making sure they focus and spend money on channels that are generating demand today, because we're not a demand gen platform. I mean, we help people create content and take the voice of their customer to help them curate demand. But we're not going to provide them with a ton of leads. We do have that functionality, but that's not the primary driver of our site.
Well, I mean, I would think, if you could come up with what do their customers buy before they buy their product? Meaning like in the Salesforce case, no one buys sales automation until they buy a CRM.
Exactly.
Okay. So if they just bought a CRM, guess what? Give them 3 months, they're going to buy a sales automation. And then what are they going to buy after that? Right. There's this, one domino effect. And I think if you could use that approach where you could really say, okay, these people bought this, now they're probably going to be in market in 3 months for something like this. Does that resonate at all?
I would say we're mutually exclusive from a lot of that. I don't think this channel, when you look at customer advocacy and advocacy marketing in general, I don't think there's really a single technology that would be purchased as a precedent to needing to focus on the voice of your customer and expanding that across all of your digital channels. Now, of course, right, if you don't have a team to curate content internally or push out things digitally through LinkedIn and Facebook and social, if your sales team just, they're not buying into, how you guys do business or the sales process in general, and they're struggling just to use a CRM, and now we're giving them access to another tool in their tool belt. Absolutely. I've had this conversation before, companies that provide like DiscoverOrg, and you have all these companies that are providing data, right? Data is one of these things that people just, there's so much out there and they don't know how to use it or prioritize it. And that's back to one of your questions, is like when we're working with salespeople and marketing is, how do you prioritize your data internally? You have all these different sources. What's making you a better salesperson with your messaging? And that's where I think we do move up the priority list, and we kind of work through that noise.
Well, that's it. I would think you guys would be number 2 next to inbound. So if I'm a company, I get the stuff hitting my site. If they're not hitting my site, then I want to see if they're hitting a review site. If they're not hitting a review site, I want to see if they're hitting another content site, and looking like I would pick it, inbound, you guys, and then like a Bombora type data. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the difference, right? And when you look at, you mentioned Bombora, and there's TechTarget and Big Willow. This is called buyer intent data, by the way. And that's a buzzword, I think, that's catching on, but you'd be surprised how many people, even in the enterprise, don't know that word yet, or they just correlate it back to their own website. So every website, right, they have their own intent data. They can see the buyer journey, what people are clicking into, and then they develop, marketing will develop a lead scoring model and an intent model now is more so what organizations are doing. But yeah, absolutely. You would think that, if I'm a salesperson and I know exactly what people are shopping for and I have access to that data, and then I can prioritize my outreach accordingly, and I know who to target right now, like that's a hot prospect because their intent on purchasing a solution is extremely high because they're reading reviews. And as we joked earlier, no one's reading reviews for just the fun of it. So yes, we combine all of these data sources, and this is where I'm working with a lot of enterprises on, creating a model where they can take our data, pair it with Bombora and TechTarget. We have companies doing that. And then they're creating these amazing intent models and really taking AI and the power of this data and conceptualizing it in an easy visual aid to salespeople. So now as a salesperson, I no longer have to, figure out what people are doing, what my target audience wants or is interested in. I already know that by opening up Salesforce and clicking into, the area where that data lies. And now I know, hey, this person's in market right now. I'm reaching out today with the right message.
And what secret tricks have you used to kind of get around, like say the marketing department's got it on the list, they like it, there's nothing against it, but
Sure.
I'm thinking to myself, I would go to the VP of sales and go, look, you're number 3 in your category. Is that affecting you?
Yeah, absolutely. Why are you losing deals today? That's one of the questions we ask every person that we work with. It's why are you losing today? What's missing the mark, both on marketing and sales?
Yeah. And they're spending all this time cold calling and cold emailing. Wouldn't you like to know who's looking at your competitor or other people in this area? People who are in market and in your general category.
Yeah, think about that, right? I mean, now with the internet as amazing as it is and how much data is out there, we don't have to spend and waste time on arbitrary means of or ineffective means of trying to create a relationship out of thin air. Yeah. We can provide transparency right up front, and that's what earns trust, right? I can say, actually, Todd Capone, former CRO of a company called Power Reviews here in Chicago, he wrote a book called The Transparency Sale. I would check it out. Yeah, he's been on the show, and he's a great guy, and they have a very similar business model. They do something very different, but when you can tap into a buyer's decision making and thought process subconsciously, and really build that trust up front when I'm selling to somebody. And say, hey, look, you've got access to all this great stuff. I realize we may not be a priority, but wouldn't you like to know, and wouldn't it be a huge competitive advantage to you over your competitors to know, who's in market, why are they in market, and then your salespeople can be a lot more effective with their time.
That's it. Instead of just building these lists and spamming and cold calling and trying to find somebody who is in market, we already have the technology to show you who is, and now you just have to connect with them.
Right. And I would say the biggest challenge, going back to one of your previous questions, one of the roadblocks I would say we run into a lot is, hey, Bret, I love this data. I love what you guys are doing. We're definitely going to get reviews on your site, other sites. We see the importance of making sure our brand is well represented, especially when you go on Google, right? You go into SEO, and that's one of our selling points is, people are finding you through Google. Majority of our traffic at G2 Crowd comes from Google. When you type in Salesforce reviews or, HubSpot, best marketing automation platform, review sites are coming up number 1, number 2. People are finding review sites over the company's own website. So the biggest roadblock we run into 9 times out of 10 is we got all this great data, but we don't know how to operationalize it. How can we do that, Bret? How can we make it easy for our salesperson? How can we make sure that, we don't have to go and create this whole, model and build it into our marketing automation and Salesforce CRM or whatever it may be. We provide different tools to make sales teams very effective and get these signals, if you will, in live time, and be able to act on them instantaneously. Because the first person to act on a lead or even a signal like that these days, they're going to be the first one to probably win that deal, or the most likely. And that's a proven point.
And that's it. If you know, otherwise you're going to be too late. If they start down the path and they're happy with somebody, to try and interrupt that is much more difficult than to
exactly.
Show up when the beauty contest begins, right?
100%. That's like with RFPs, right? I mean, if you get an RFP, you're already late to the game. A lot of companies still rely on RFPs. So if you're a salesperson and you can get in the door and right when they're starting to research, at the very top of their funnel or the top start of their buying journey. And we can tell you that the second they hit G2 Crowd, because they're gonna read reviews typically, like I said earlier, before they even reach out to you. That's just human nature now online. People are doing their own research. So if I can tell you before a company even enters the RFP process, imagine if you got in the door and had those conversations with those people. You can help them craft that RFP and make it advantageous to working with you folks. I used to do that in the HR payroll space. If we can get in the door first and help them craft an RFP, 9 times out of 10 we would actually win it.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where do people go to connect with you and learn more about G2 Crowd?
Yeah, great question, Brian. I would have them go to www.g2crowd.com. Write a review. Everyone uses technology. I would say do that first. And then if you're in the market for buying something, go out there and take a look.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I think this is going to be a key element of being able to communicate with your marketplace about references, referrals, and reviews. The transparency that exists today is just unbelievable, and it's only going to become more. But we also can't assume people are doing all that research. Everyone talks about all the information's out there, but is anybody doing anything with it? Does anybody really do any research? I can't tell you the number of times people go, what's your website? B2brevenue.com. And where's the link to your podcast? Why isn't it on Android? It's on Android. It's been on Android since Android came out. How would I find it there? Try to use the Google thing. So I think it's pretty overstated that people will proactively do much research. Some people do. A lot of people don't. We are kind of the not only deliverers of information, but persuaders. I hate when people say teaching, because teaching is passive. The onus is on the student to learn, not the teacher to convey. What we do is we persuade, we convince, we shepherd and Sherpa people through a decision process that we first have to understand. When we sit back and what would you like to do next? That's an okay question to ask if you know the answer. If you don't know the answer, it's not a good question to ask. We have to be the person who is really guiding our prospects and our customers through this decision-making process. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Also, I want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Co-Video is the way I'm connecting with people. Video this year has blown up my business. It was probably 5x this year. It's been phenomenal because I've been able to connect with people. People see me. There's a level of trust and connection that you have when it's not just the podcast. People see me on LinkedIn. Oh, that's what that goofball looks like. Yeah. You might want to stay off video. That's the most often feedback I get. I'm joking. But the ability to connect with people, and you say, well, I just want to type. The thing is, email is getting burnt. Textual email's getting burnt. This marketing automation thing, it's on its last leg. Everyone's kind of moving upstream onto social sites, connecting with people and finding out who people are. And if you're just this anonymous email address with the same BS text that, you learned off of, one of the goofballs on LinkedIn about what works or what worked 20 years ago, or what this failed SDR, he was so successful that he didn't want to become an AE. He wants to go teach people how to do things. It's just not going to work. Everyone's teaching the same BS over and over again, and it just doesn't work. So what do they say? Oh, you got to do more of it. So the volume increases, the effectiveness goes down. It doesn't work. So, and everybody I talk to sales managers all the time, and they think it's lazy reps. Well, people are people. People will do what's in their best interest, meaning that if they'll cherry pick the leads, they'll spend their time on the most productive use of their time. And if you increase the activity and if you judge people off the activity, you're just going to get gamesmanship. And if you believe, and let's face it, everyone's playing a game. You cannot not play the game. And when I hear people say, oh, well, nobody does that here. Well, everybody does it everywhere. I've been on the board of companies, and I hear the CEO, oh, this $500,000 deal's closing this month. I go, okay, is it in procurement? Oh, no, not yet. Where is it? Well, we had our first meeting with them. Well, it's not going to close this month. You don't have to be a sales podcaster to know it's going to take longer than that. And he's just, covering their butt. And that's the thing. So we have to focus on the quality, the outcome. And I'm working with a lot of the partners on this, on increasing quality KPIs. And this is what you should do as reps. What makes an A-level day for you? And if you have to get one meeting a day, get that meeting the easiest way possible. Then you can get 2, 3, 5 meetings a day using your brain instead of pounding the phone or email. And video email is the way I do it. It's so authentic and genuine, and people want to hear what you have to say. They know you put some effort into it. They know it's about them. They know it's just not some vanilla thing that you're doing with everybody. So covideo.com, check it out. Make sure you told them you heard about it on The Brutal Truth. Oh, boy, what a week it's been. Anyways, I really appreciate everybody telling somebody about the podcast. We'll see you next time at b2brevenue.com. So that's it. I really appreciate it. And please tell somebody about the podcast and let me know if I can help you in any way. Oh, and you want to hear some results from the course? Well, here you go.
I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away because they're not really about work. Yeah. I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time. Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, So
good. Yeah.
I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point. And every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, So.
And it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony, because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there. Right. But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital